Welcome to the Peer Review Podcast, Creativity and Fulfillment in Academia.
I'm Mira Sukharov.
And I'm Sarah Bunin-Benor.
In each episode, we talk to fellow scholars, coaches, and other experts on topics related to finding meaning in academia.
Today, our guest is Elizabeth Otters-White.
After more than 20 years in faculty and leadership roles at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Elizabeth Otters-White left academia and started a coaching and consulting practice to help clients in higher ed and beyond to thrive. She's the author of two short books designed to support and uplift higher education professionals. The first is called Well on Your Way, an Assistant Professor's Companion. And the second is Well in the Lead, an Academic Leader's Companion. And that one was written with Suzanne Dove. Elizabeth divides her time between Madison and Florida, and today we've reached her in Madison. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
There's so much in those books that I devoured last night, especially zoomed into the assistant professor one. I'm well past my time of being an assistant professor, but what you described from your memories of it as well just feels so raw and feels like yesterday. And it sort of feels like a lot of those fears and struggles stay with you. They get more muted along the way. But tell us a bit about what motivated you to write it and what you really want people to take away from it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's amazing. Like even physically, I don't know how you experienced it, but when I bring some of those memories to mind, I can, like I'm there, right? Like I can feel the physical sensations, like whether it's the knot in my stomach or the just uneasiness. And I mean, the main reason that I wrote it, and I think I sort of hopefully lead with this in the book, is so that people feel less alone. I know that I felt like I wasn't getting it. You know what I mean? I felt like I didn't know how to do it right, or my sort of insecurity or lack of a sense of belonging at times was sort of a shortcoming on my part. And over time, especially after leaving academia, interestingly, and talking to more and more academics as a coach, I realized like this is universal. We don't speak about it that often. At least I didn't, or people around me didn't. And when I really started to talk to people, I realized almost everybody has some version of this experience, and yet many of us feel like it's us. And so I really wanted to reach people, and I chose that title or subtitle companion carefully. I really want it to feel like you have someone kind of by your side, that you're not alone through that really tough journey that, as you said, kind of stays with us.
hmm there's a moment in there in the book where you say you felt soft, and you hadn't yet revealed your discipline yet in the
Mm.
text, but we know it's finance. And so I guess was it methods that the others were more quantitative, and you hadn't yet revealed yet which University of Wisconsin campus you were on. So I was thinking, is it Madison, or other ones might have a different flavor. And I felt this similar way, but in a different direction, that I was the only one doing a certain kind of work. And years later, I sort of felt it doesn't matter. Make space, take up space. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's one of the things definitely that I hope to impart to clients when I'm working with them is do it your way. Like I think I will take responsibility for having a very narrow view of what it was to sort of do academia, right? To be a professor. And I looked at the people around me, and for the most part, I won't say I tried to emulate them because I was true to myself. I think, though, that's what caused a lot of that dissonance, that cognitive dissonance, and that feeling like I didn't know what to do with them and they didn't know what to do with me, that I just was different. Um, I also was one of sometimes the only woman, often one of just a few women in the department. And for quite a while, I was younger than many of the other colleagues. Even just physically, like I'm pretty petite, and most of my colleagues were men over 6 feet tall. So there were just a lot of ways that I felt different and felt that I needed to tamp down certain parts of myself. And in reflection, over time, having a little bit of distance and also getting more mature in my career, even before I left academia, I realized, no, as you're saying, no, you can do it your way. You can be who you are. And in fact, the people who make the biggest impacts, in my experience, are those who just fully own their own brilliance, which makes them different and unique and able to really contribute in a powerful way and shift things. So that's what I hope to inspire in people.
Hmm.
That's
So
that
just
that's exactly what I realize now about your book. It's wordplay. It's well on your way, and it's not
Yes.
just on your way to becoming a full professor on the tenure track, but it's also doing it your way, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and being well, and so I think that's a brilliant, brilliant
Thank
title.
you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny because a friend and former colleague, and actually also a former client, when she read the second book, the book for leaders, it was then that she realized, oh, there's multiple meanings to well on your way. I just took it, sort of at face value. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
and Sarah is a brilliant sociolinguist, so
I
Sarah will
know.
be
I've
quick
I've
to
looked
notice these
I
things.
know.
It's
I've looked
fantastic.
into both of your work, so I feel especially honored that to receive that compliment on the title from Sarah.
Now, what's intriguing to me is that, and we've touched on this a little bit, but the theme of loneliness we
Mm.
talked about in the assistant professor book, and that word though comes up in the academic leaders book as well. So tell us a little bit about how you see
Mm.
loneliness manifesting across different phases of one's career.
Oh, wow. That's a great question because it is different, right? I mean, there are similarities, of course. Loneliness has lots of just, common features for the different flavors, and yet it is a very different context. So, let me start by just speaking from my own experience, and then maybe you'll have follow-on questions if that's too narrow. So, as I already mentioned, as an assistant professor, I was different in a lot of ways, and I felt very different. And I also chose in a lot of ways to isolate myself. I had young kids at home. I wanted to just get into the office, pound things out, and leave, so that I could be with my family. So I didn't go to lunch with everyone who went to lunch every day, and I didn't do a lot of those things. And it was intentional, and I don't regret it. And I mean, let's face it, right? That contributes to an actual sense of isolation, which enhances or exacerbates that loneliness. Um, I think though at the core, it really was about feeling different and feeling that I couldn't fully reveal how I was actually feeling for fear of being judged as we were kind of talking about earlier, as not serious or, too, I don't know, like I didn't have what it takes. I wasn't confident. I wasn't, defending my work, and I didn't live and breathe finance, which I really felt like my colleagues, they were just so inspired. Like it's just what they were so passionate about. And I found it interesting. I would get excited about it. And it wasn't to that level of like, oh, I would do anything to think about these topics. I had lots of things I was interested in. So I felt lonely in that way as an assistant professor. As a leader, I think the loneliness comes from the limited number of people that you can share the challenges with, right? There are lots of things that you grapple with that are very complex, in a lot of cases, very consequential, or at least feel that way, high stakes, um, that are connected to whether it's an HR issue or, I mean, just things that you can't be fully transparent about. And you can't speak even often to the peers that you once really trusted, right? To confide in. It's just a different level. And there's also this sense, and now I'm sharing both from my own experience and from the leaders that I work with as clients, there is sometimes a sense of immense responsibility, right? Like the weight on your shoulders. So I often try to remind people that it isn't all on them, right? A lot of these decisions don't come down to one person. And yet, it can feel that way. So, and a lot of the leaders I work with sort of describe that sense of of loneliness or isolation, not being able to share with others or consult even with others.
Yes, so lonely at the top.
Yeah, right. So additionally, you are in a different relationship to people who were formerly your peers.
Mhm.
And so, things can really shift in ways that can be a little unsettling, and can create again a sense of distance that you didn't previously have. So I think that also can contribute to that loneliness.
And when you say it that way, it reminds me of that. That's a big part of being a new assistant professor is in graduate school, your peers are not there to judge and evaluate you. And all of a sudden, you're thrown in with a bunch of so-called peers who are there then going to be voting on your tenure application. So that can feel especially lonely and isolating.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. That sense that you're always kind of under the microscope. And I think that for sure fueled my hesitancy. I think it does for almost everyone. It
Mhm.
fuels, frankly, hesitancy I see in a lot of people to even advocate for ourselves, right? To even ask for something that's in fact quite reasonable. But it's like, oh, I don't want to this, I don't want to that, I don't want to upset someone, I don't want to seem, it can really start to spiral, right? You can really get into these head games that are unhelpful.
Mhm. So let's talk about hesitancy in another realm that you do write about, and that is hesitancy to press manuscript complete, let's say, the perfectionism. So how do
Yeah.
you, it's a word we use a lot in academia and other creative fields. How do you understand perfectionism? Do you feel it's something that all your clients have or only some have? And how do you help people through that?
Mm. So I would not say that all of my clients have it. I would say that everyone in academia holds themselves to a very high standard. So that's kind of a given. It rises to what I would call perfectionism, or, an overly high standard, or a really loud inner critic. Like those are all kind of connected in my mind. In a lot of people. I mean, a lot of the people I work with, I would say, but not everyone. Um, the way I have come to understand it, I think for myself informs the way I think about it with other people. So there was a time, probably this even predates like my academic career, but maybe in grad school or undergrad, where I did not fully understand all of the downsides. Like perfectionism, that's great. That means you want to do a really good job. It's like, no, 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 no. So I now understand it as really based in fear and based, at least again, for me, and I think this is fairly common, and based in a desire for control. So I know in myself that when I am getting really nitpicky, really wanting to, revise, 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 or improve, refine, even whether it's in a work setting or another setting, right? Clean, it can be cleaning the bathroom. And suddenly I'm like scrubbing some tiny spot, right? And I'm realizing, okay, I'm disconnected from something like fundamental. Like I am not grounded right now. I am getting caught up in something. And maybe it's honestly, it can be even connected to like, I'm not honoring my needs, or I'm ignoring a boundary. And then that manifests as me trying to grab this control where I can. So that's kind of how I view perfectionism on a fundamental level. Um, I really try to help people as best I can, and myself too, to embrace what I think is the true beauty of academia, which is not manifest. I mean, I'll say it's like sort of the underlying hidden beauty that still needs to come forth fully, which is exploration and learning and trying things and growing. And like if you are working on a manuscript and you perfect it before you get any feedback on it, before you send it out for friendly reviews to peers, or you send it to a journal or a conference, you are guaranteeing yourself that you're going to have to rework all kinds of stuff. You have wasted almost for sure. You've wasted time because you've like over improved it, right? You've overfit the model in a sense. And and that's just a waste of time. And so sometimes even just that sort of practical sense can help break people out of it. And sometimes it has to be more like, how does it feel to make a mistake? Like really getting a little bit to the deeper, like, is it okay for you to make a mistake? And why might it not be okay for you to make a mistake? Like what happens inside you, what happens in your body when you have that feeling of like, oh no, I messed something up. And how can we kind of explore that a little bit in a way that allows us to withstand that discomfort. Some of this is like really little things like, okay, we're going to practice sending an email without rereading it 3 times. Like that is a real life example that I have used with multiple clients, right? So little baby steps, reminding people that B plus work is often more than good enough. We don't need to go for A plus plus.
I'm trying to read myself into each thing you said, and I'm thinking, given the number of typos in my emails, I don't suffer from perfectionism. I think I suffer from some
Good.
other things.
I'm
So,
glad to hear that's not
yeah,
one
I
of
don't,
those.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think, no, I don't think so.
Well, I do suffer from that to some extent. And in fact, I attended a workshop where I learned exactly what you just said, that B plus work is good enough. And specifically that for some people, what you think of as your B plus work, other people might think of as A plus work. And so that was really helpful for me. But I still want to do what I consider A plus work in certain domains. In other domains, I don't. But the rereading an email thing, I don't reread my emails 3 times, maybe once, but if there's a typo, I'm going to fix it. I mean, so tell us more about how you help clients in that way. Like, do you have them not just not reread an email 3 times, but also send off an email with a typo?
Yeah, it's so funny. These are great, great points and great questions. So years ago, I read a book. One of the suggestions they made was like intentionally making mistakes, like absolutely knowingly making a fool of yourself, right? Like walking into some situation and just being, whatever. And that I will say, I'm not quite there yet. Like that still feels a little terrifying. There are times when A-level work is appropriate. I think though, if that's across the board, if that's everything, that's where we can really get into trouble because frankly, we're not going to get everything done. And then what ends up happening, at least in a lot of the people I work with, is they become a number of things. They become paralyzed because there's not enough time to get everything done to their standard. They then fall behind on things, which makes it even worse. So the paralysis increases. Then they're so far behind on things that they can't possibly see how to get caught up and they're not getting everything done. So they start to legitimately feel bad, right? Because people are getting on them. Where is this? Where is that? Why they feel guilty about co-authors that, so it really can snowball if we're trying to do it with no discernment, right? Or no intention. And there's so much to do in academia already. The workload, the volume of work is too high. I'm just going to say that, period. It doesn't matter what role you're in. It doesn't matter what, stage of your career. The volume of work is too high. And so if we are trying to do all of it, frankly, if we're trying to do all of it to any level, it's crushing. And if we're trying to do all of it to A plus level, it's impossible, absolutely impossible. And so some of it is just having those conversations. And then really trying to get people unstuck from the paralysis because people, and I put myself in this category 100%, the stories we tell ourselves about what other people are thinking are just, I mean, unbelievable, really, and so unhelpful generally, right? If a co-author is emailing and saying, where's the paper? That's pretty clear. I can't tell you though how many times I have clients who are like, oh my gosh, my co-author, and I haven't, and I said I didn't, da, da, da. And then when they find, and they're too afraid, they don't even want to touch it, they don't want to reach out, they feel too guilty. And when they finally do, the person's like, oh my gosh, I've been so busy, I haven't even thought about it. So
Mm.
I tell people, everyone is so mired in their own stuff they really don't have time to think about you. And I mean that in like a freeing way, right? Not in an uncaring way, but people are not spending nearly as much time thinking about us and our shortcomings or the things we didn't do as we tell ourselves. I had one brilliant client say at one point, said something like, people are going to blah, 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 something negative. I think he was preparing to give a talk or something. People are going to blah, blah, blah. And by people, I mean the voices in my head. Say, yes, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you were to tell me, Mira, no one cares, okay? Everyone, I'd be like, what do you mean no one cares? People aren't thinking about Mira Sukharov day and night the way I'm thinking about John Travolta or, I want people to be thinking about Mira Sukharov. So there's the flip side. But let me elaborate a little bit. The idea of wanting recognition, accolades, wanting to be productive, wanting to make a difference. Okay, of course, morally, I want to make a difference, but let's leave that aside for now. Wanting to be a star, wanting all those things. How do you, and then you do say in the book, you are not your CV.
Mm.
Right? You do say that,
Yeah, I
right?
do. I
And
do.
I'm
Yeah, it's
thinking,
the title of a
I'm
chapter.
not. And of course, I've been told that before. But every year when I have to put my CV in, we talk about this with other guests. There's always when I have to put my CV into my department for evaluation, I'm always a little worried there. But in general, I how do you help people get away from that trap?
Yeah, if you're surfacing a lot of things, hopefully our work has meaning, right? And we want people to recognize that because if no one sees it or thinks about it, it's not having the impact that we desire, right? So some of that comes from a really good place. And of course, some of it is required for survival, right? If nobody's reading our work, if nobody has any idea who we are, it's going to be very difficult to get tenure and then continue in the field. So some of that has to happen. I think, the first thing that comes to mind just in hearing you sort of describe this is a former colleague. We were actually at a work connected personal function, so which I didn't do many of, but we happened to be at that time. And she was asking me kind of what I was up to or whatever, and I mentioned doing some things with friends, and she asked, Are your friends academics, or are they real friends?
Yeah.
And I thought, like, this was years ago, but it's so stuck with me, right? Because I think part of this is about having a life outside of work, whatever that looks like. Knowing what matters most to us, knowing what we really value, having some non-negotiables. I think these are all really critical to striking the balance because there is so little positive feedback. I mean, look, in my experience anyway, and I think in others, like you'll get a manuscript accepted, you know, every so often, but in between that, you'll get a bunch of rejections, then sure you'll get a revise and resubmit, but it's like here's all the stuff that needs to be fixed, So the validation is limited in again in my experience, and so we need to find it, we need to take it and savor it when it comes. That's one piece. We need to celebrate our wins even when they seem really small. Like that's another thing I try to help people with is it's not that the only wins are like getting a paper published or even getting an R&R, um, or winning an award. Like let's celebrate. It was really, really hard to get started on that thing after 2 months of setting it aside. And I did it today. That's huge, right? Like that's worthy of celebration. So that's part of that um, groundedness outside of the CV in a sense. And then just making sure that you have other things that matter to you, that you're, and I wasn't always great about this, with the exception of my kids. I did always find time for them, but other things you're also making time for, right, outside of work. Um, Even if you don't want to, I think it serves as a lifeline when things are really, there are always these dips, right? When things look really bleak within the academic setting, it's nice to have that outside.
Mm. Can you give us some examples from clients without their names or identifying information, of course, about these things that you're talking about, where you got people to celebrate wins that were
Mm.
small, or where they were dealing with the work-life, sorry, not work-life balance, like what do you say instead of work-life balance?
Yeah. I
Family
mean,
or
sometimes I still say it. I know people have different feelings about it. Sometimes I talk about integration, although sometimes that's not what people want either. Sometimes they're wanting more to compartmentalize. Um, what I try to emphasize is that we're one person, right? We're one person. And so no matter how we want to think about it, we need to factor in all aspects of our lives when we're doing our planning, right? When we're setting our goals. We can't ignore the fact that we have 3 kids at home who need all kinds of things when we're mapping out our plan for the summer, right? And they're not in school. And so we've got to like, right? Like these are all things. So so examples, I mean, they really are as simple as like, okay, so first of all, I'll say one of the things I love about coaching, both as a coach and as a coachee, someone who's received it and from many different people at different points in my career, is the kind of tailored aspect of it, that it really is designed to kind of meet you where you are. And so I will often look to clients to help, okay, like what are we going to accomplish? And what's a tiny baby step? I'm a huge believer in baby steps, like, and then momentum. So we'll talk about things like on ramps. How can you make it as easy as possible for yourself to get back to that project tomorrow after you finish today? Or 5 months from now, so like being kind to your future self, tiny baby steps, like let's just open the file, right? What can you commit to and feel okay? And then they might say like, I'm gonna commit to working on something for 2 hours tomorrow. And I'll say, okay, how does that feel? How easy does it feel? How confident are you? "Mm, maybe like a 6, 6.5." And then I'm like, okay, how can we increase it a little? Like, let's scale it back. Let's scale it back until it feels like your mind can't trick you out of it. Because that's the thing. Like, we have the best intentions, but we have all these parts, right? And they're really smart and sneaky and tricky. And so when you're talking to me, you might feel like, oh, I can do it. I'm ready. Tomorrow comes, the dog is sick. You get 10 emails, things are blowing up, and it doesn't happen. If instead the commitment had been, I'm going to sit down for 5 minutes, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, 5 minutes is very often the number that I land on with people. 5 minutes, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to figure out where the file is on my computer. Because a lot of times by that point, people don't even have any idea what's where, right? And that's it. Or, ideally, I'm going to find it and open the file. And I don't have to do anything else because this is so my experience and it drives me crazy. When I give myself space and I'm not trying to force myself to do something, I am so much more likely to want to do it. It's like when I am pounding on myself, you have to do this, you have to do this, it feels so restricted, so constrained, and I push back. I don't like it. Where 5 minutes, then I can celebrate my 5 minutes that often become 50 minutes or 5 hours.
I'm listening and I'm reflecting on our career, our chosen career, and a career we did a lot to achieve. And I'm thinking if this was a podcast about real estate agents and there was a coach that we were speaking to, and I know you actually aren't exclusive in your client list to, as you mentioned, to professors, but, and you said, just hold the lockbox in your hand. Just use the combination. And okay, I would say, wow, Elizabeth is coaching clients in real estate who are really suffering from some major pathologies. And I hope they're getting the help they need. And I'm glad Elizabeth's there. And I'm thinking, OMG, how did our career become this? Because I think all of us can see themselves as professors in that. I don't want to look at my file today. I'm not going to write anything today. I can't write. It's not often, it's not because 3 kids are sick or because there's a million fires. It's because of our own blocks. So, talk a bit about those internal blocks and why they're so prevalent in academia, which is a field, a career we spent years and years getting a PhD for, won out all the other competitors for our job, and we're still having these blocks.
Oh, yes, brilliantly put. Yes, 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 absolutely. So, a couple of months ago, I served on a panel at the American AAA. It's Anatomy Connected. It's the main meeting of the American Association of Anatomy or Anatomists. I don't remember which. And it was a panel that was put together by a couple of anatomy faculty, and it was on academic trauma. And there were 3 of us. And the other 2 people, panelists, I mean, it was a brilliant I was so thrilled to be part of it. I mean, so important to have it. I mean, it was so great on so many levels. And the other two spoke a little bit more directly to what we might think of as, um, this is controversial, big T trauma. Okay, things like, you know, whether it's some type of abuse, really direct abuse or harassment or other things. Um, and then I spoke more broadly because I will tell you, I think what you're describing and what we've all experienced is a form of trauma. Again, I am not a medical professional. I'm not a mental health professional. So I say this, from my own learning, but no official certification here. There are a lot of things about the environment that are very, very challenging. And I will say, I am more and more seeing clients using the term trauma. And so I'm also choosing to use it more. That presentation wasn't recorded, but I put together a version of it that I recorded myself, about sort of, called it Pathways to Peace, to just begin exploring some of the causes of academic trauma and how we might begin to move forward, whether it's for ourselves or for others. And we think about a couple of things, at least I do. So too much too fast or too little for too long are ways that people will sometimes describe what can lead to a trauma response. Could we think of better descriptors for life in academia? Too much too fast, too little for too long, right? It's just this constant flow of demands, some external, some we're placing on ourselves because we are overachievers, right? We don't do what you just described if we're not overachievers. Too little for too long. There, in most cases, there are exceptions, but the support systems are just not there. It's a very autonomous career, which is great. However, as we talked about earlier, that can easily cross over into being an isolating or lonely career. It's also a career where people, I mean, at least this was my experience, and I think it's pretty common. If you're senior faculty and you have a junior faculty member who joins, you're like, hey, they're at the top of their game. They just got out of grad school. They know all the latest stuff, right? I could learn from them. We're not looking and saying, I think there's a lot of culture change that needs to happen. I think the norms around defending ourselves, right? Always being confident about our work and being ready to tell everyone why we made the choices we made and why they're the best choices and all of those things. Um, it just it leads to a hypervigilance. I just think there are a lot of aspects of the culture combined with our predispositions as people who have really high standards, who want to do well, who want to make a difference, who want to achieve. And so the combination of the environment and our internal dialogue, I think, is crushing for so many people, so many people. And I experienced that 100% myself, and I see it in many, many of my clients.
Mhm. I feel like I'm getting a contact high from you picturing myself as a fly on the wall in the room when you're giving coaching because
Mm,
it's very holistic. It's holistic to our whole beings, and as you
mm,
said, and that's so. And it's both how we operate as individuals in the world, and then I guess the next task before us is how to change those environments, how to push those norms away from the cult of busyness, away. Some people used to say when I was at a low point in my career, people, I mean, I was employed and everything was going well externally, but I wasn't feeling good about my career. And some people would say, oh, you must be busy. They'd meet me. Are you busy? You must be busy. And I would say, no, not particularly. What I meant is I'm between projects. I'm not finding something to really sink my teeth into. I'm not feeling really productive right now. So no, I'm not busy. And people didn't know what to do with that. Yeah.
yes. Yeah. No, you're right. It's so, I mean, even that, right? The fact that we have ebbs and flows in our motivation, in our creativity, in the spark. And I don't know what your experience was, Sarah and Mira, but immediately after tenure, I mean, I would tell people then, and I will say it now, I felt like the tenure process beat the intellectual curiosity out of me. I was so just focused on what did I have to do, especially in those final years, to get it done. And frankly, I barely got it done. I write about this a little bit in the book. I did get tenure at my original institution, but it was far from a slam dunk in the end. Um, And I was burned out. I mean, is the fact of it. I was burned out. And a lot of people are burned out now. COVID, I mean, oh my gosh, the ongoing demands of COVID. Let's go back to this trauma topic, right? I mean, again, we could spend an hour talking about the impact of that and how that continues in so many ways. So the demands have gotten higher and higher and higher. The support in some ways has gotten less and less. The political environment now is challenging. I mean, it's very difficult. And go back to 15 years ago, maybe, where it was theoretically easier and it was still so hard because you didn't want to go up to a colleague, or I wouldn't anyway. I don't want to put words in your mouth and be like, oh, I've been spending the last 3 weeks trying to come up with an idea for a new project and I've got nothing. Like that's just not something you're going to really broadly share, right? Because who knows what they're going to think. Fact of the matter is, they're going to think, oh, she's going through a dry spell. Oh, yeah, that happened to me, is what they're going to think. But it's terrifying, or at least it was for me, to think about saying that. I'll add one quick note to that. I had a senior colleague that I worked very closely with and very well with, and I was very lucky to have that relationship when I was an assistant professor. And I would describe him always as both a quick thinker and a deep thinker, which I felt was like such an envious, combination. I always would say you have to be one or the other to really survive in academia, but to be both is just, I mean, an amazing blessing. I am not both. And he would say stuff, and we were working on papers together. So, I mean, I felt like, we were colleagues and co-authors, and he would say stuff. And there were times when I would leave his office and I would think to myself, I have no idea what he was talking about. And I would call my lifeline, which was a dear friend from grad school, and she was my safe person, and I would call and I would say, do you have any idea like what this econometric method, like, or why he would say we had to do this, or, and often she wouldn't know either, but at least I felt a little better that there was someone else with a PhD who had no idea what he was talking about. But why didn't I just say? He would have expected me to say if I didn't get it. I just was afraid he would think I didn't know what I was doing, or I was stupid, or, whatever. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah, those are powerful moments. So tell us about your ideal academic day. Like what makes you feel good in a given day or your
mm,
ideal work day?
now as a coach or when I was in academia. In academia,
Let's say when you were in academia.
I I am an introvert and I really value time alone to think, and process and reflect and wonder and all of that. And I also really value meaningful conversation and interaction with people. And so it would have been a day when I had nothing on my calendar. I also have a love-hate with that, but mostly a love. Nothing on my calendar, no meetings scheduled. And yet I woke up feeling, and I know we can't control this, but I woke up feeling relatively energized, right? So I could go in, and it wasn't one of those like stand in the shower, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, like I've had many times. Um, and where it's like that right mix of maybe someone pops by and I've got the space for it, right? And we talk about something, it's not just small talk, like there's something with some meaning, whether it's connected to a project or what's going on in their life. Um, and then I'm making some progress on something existing, right? So actually, it's funny as I'm saying it, I didn't even realize it, but I can tie it to there's I think she's a psychologist called Christine Podansky, something like that. And I heard her speak about three things that can boost your mood, and it's kind of getting them in the right balance. It's doing something that you've been avoiding, doing something that gives you a sense of accomplishment, and doing something that you enjoy. And I'm realizing that without even being conscious of it, that's kind of what I'm touching on in this ideal day, is a balance of those things. So the meaningful conversation, the making some progress on something that like kind of needs to move forward, and then it has to include a walk outside in good weather. I love being outside in good weather, especially in a lovely setting. So that's on it for sure. Um, and I will say, like, full disclosure, I almost never had academic days like this. Like, partly because I wasn't being intentional. I never took breaks. I didn't go out for walks. I didn't do any of that stuff. And it was to my detriment, for sure.
Aspirational is a good way to answer too, because I
Yeah.
think we're all working on what we aspire to together. So we were thinking
Yeah.
through this together.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Otters White, thank you so much for all these insights, personal, professional, and you've given us so much to think about. We appreciate
Thank
your
you
time.
both. It's been such a pleasure. As I said, I love meaningful conversation, and this was so meaningful. You asked such, just powerful questions that really resonate for me with my experience, the work I do with clients. So just really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Peer Review podcast is produced and hosted by Sarah Bunin-Benor and Mira Sukharov. Talia Ehrenberg is assistant producer and editor. The music is written and performed by the Galactic Ambassadors. Support for this podcast comes from a faculty grant from Hebrew Union College. If you would like to sponsor an episode, you can reach us at peerreview@huc.edu. You can join the conversation on Facebook at Peer Review, Cultivating Creativity and Fulfillment in Academia. Thank you for listening.